So we're going to talk about influence from a couple of different ways. Influence for a lot of us that are women of color is not always looked at as a positive. Would you agree with that? We get the job, we get the education, we never get the corner office, the perception is, but oftentimes we do. It's a nice place to work. If I come to work on time for at least a week, I might get the preferable parking space. But pretty much, that's all I may get, even though I may want more. And throughout the day, we've heard the various speakers talk about what does that more look like. I love the exercises that we did with our speaker before where we had to check off the boxes. And I think it creates for us this opportunity to reflect long-term. What are the things that are important to us? And I think I said in one of the mentoring circles, it's all about the choices you make, not the choices other people make for you. They have to deal with those choices. You need to deal with the choices you make for yourself. So that's a little bit of this discussion we're going to have in terms of influence. First, I've got a couple of quotes for you, one at the beginning and one at the end. Love this quote from Joseph Wong. No, I'm not quite sure who he is. I will probably do another Google search on him in case he has more tidbits like this one. Influence is our inner ability to lift people up to our perspectives. Doesn't have to be so that they're like us, but what's our perspective of who they are? And we influence people to think about that, okay? So quickly, we're going to talk about defining influence and its role in creating outcomes we want. By the way, irrespective of your level in the organization or your level at home, okay? Whether you're younger sibling, older sibling, whether you're single, married, 15 children, it doesn't matter. Those are not excuses that we should be using for what happens to us in terms of influence. What barriers do we as women of color face? Understand the role of emotional intelligence. How many of you have heard the word, taken an assessment on emotional intelligence? Okay. How many of you took that assessment and said, this isn't me? How many of you did that? Thank you for being honest, okay? We're going to look a little bit at 9 types of influencing skills. There's a great assessment out there that I use with my client companies on looking at what influence looks like. So I'm going to go through those quickly for you. I've listed them in my PowerPoint, which you will be able to get after the program, okay? And then we'll talk about some actions you can take now. What I really appreciate is that most of the day has been about reflecting and understanding, hey, is that me? Do I think like that? Where you have to be honest without judgment about yourself. I want to give you a couple of things we can do action right now. And then we'll do a quick debrief and recap if we have time. Okay, so how do we influence others? Let me get a quick show of hands. How many of you believe that you're pretty good in terms of influencing? Okay. And for those of you that raise your hand, is that only influencing with your children that are younger than you and have to do what you say? Okay? Because even the young ones have figured out they don't have to do what you say. All right? Understanding yourself and the impact that you have on others, building a web of influence. This is not a one-off activity. You need to build a web of influence. And by the way, for me, that authenticity and integrity is all around to what extent can I make a commitment that I'm always going to be this way as far as influence is concerned. And not just a one-off where I have to apologize and pray about it later that I didn't treat that person well. The ability to win others over to your way of thinking. You don't even have to be good at agreeing with your way of thinking, but there might be a political reason why you need to go down that path. You need to reflect on that. Leading others to take action, as you mentioned. To be persuasive, appealing to emotional triggers. What's that mean? How do we appeal to emotional triggers? Values, what else? Okay, our belief system. What about the things that continually really make us upset or really make us euphoric? So these triggers don't all have to be negative. To be able to change people's mind without resentment, what's that mean? Positively. My mother used to say before she gave me a spanking, now this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. Okay, now get across that bed, because then you got the little spanking. We don't want people to resent the reasons that we're looking to influence them. And it's our responsibility to get them to understand. But we have to be open enough, you know what? You're making a very good point. I think we could do this together, or maybe the way I was looking at it was not necessarily the way we want to go. So influence is not always your way or the highway. Okay? All right. I did a quick couple of definitions. There's a plethora, but here's just a couple that I like. The capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. And then the capacity or power of a person's persons or things to be compelling force on or produce effects on the action, behavior, blah, blah, blah. Why is it important that we understand what influence is? Why is it important? Yeah.
I think it's a critical part of success.
It is a critical part of success, and it is a learned skill. I'm not getting a PhD in influencing. I got to learn the skill, and there's going to be some pain around it as well. Okay? And some euphoria. So one of the things, if you notice, the title is of this program, Become a Masterful Influencer. In your programs, it talks about that up level. And we do already do influencing. So now we want to just move that needle a little bit, which is why we have the title as we do in the program. Want to move it a little bit more. But there's some challenges that we have that we need to think about as far as women of color, and then the ideas that are just for everyone, mainstream, every group. No age is left out, no race, no ethnicity, no gender. So, oftentimes, we might face a lack of political savvy. What's that mean, political savvy? Okay, I'll ask a different way. When you got the job you're in, for those of you who are working for an organization as opposed to having your own companies, what was important for you to learn besides what you were doing right in terms of that technical work? What did you have to learn? The culture of the company. What else? Being diplomatic. By the way, where do you learn that diplomacy? Interaction with people. You know, we do have to observe. We have to see how people do things. How is it done here as opposed to where I used to be? How is it done here as opposed to my own business? Okay? Negative experiences that don't build confidence. There was a lot of discussion about how we build confidence, why it's important. But if we've had negative experiences, our presentation wasn't well received, our boss is not happy with the research that I did, my team doesn't think I've done enough, we may have some issues around our self-confidence. Continued stereotypes that follow women of color regarding communication style, ambition, or lack thereof. Let's be smart. Because the whole opportunity around influence is the gradual way that you prepare people for who you are. And I don't need to show up as an angry black woman. And I remember really irritating a bunch of people at a company that I worked with because they said, well, we understand you have a chip on your shoulder. I said, where? Oh my goodness, where is it? My husband didn't tell me I had one this morning, because I need them to know that I'm totally clueless about that discussion about a chip. Totally. But I also know that I need ways to work with others around getting things done and doing action. Everybody with me? I love that you laughed about this discussion because we've often all cried about it. I have had coaching clients that have said to me, particularly my Asian American clients, I did all the right things, got straight A's in school, did the internships. My filial responsibility was totally right there. Took care of my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, and the kids. Married a great guy. I'm a tiger mom. And my boss consistently gives me high marks on my performance appraisal. But I don't understand why I don't get an opportunity to be a manager or to lead a team or to lead that project. So I asked the question, and by the way, Asian American, Latina, African American, and all of our iterations, same answer, same question. Well, tell me what you asked for. Nothing. I just thought they'd see that I was doing a good job and then they'd promote me. Thought that they'd see that I was phenomenal and then promote me. Thought that they'd see that my accent is great, I can articulate, I dress decent, great shoes. I mean, why didn't they do their duty? I did my duty. That is not the real world. It's not. So what can you guys do about it? Let me just put a couple of other things that are up here. Lack of access to internal and external networks. The answer is not, but I've got kids and I just don't have time. That's not the answer. You creatively work out ways that you can be available for things that either happen after work, lunchtime, blah, blah, blah. Even every once in a while on the weekends. Again, your choice. You make time for those things so that you are not looked at as just working for your children. We know there are other reasons that you're working. And then look at that mental and physical strain of always having to prove ourselves. Isn't that true? Don't we have to do that? And yet, the only people that really care about that is us. Truth be told. It still doesn't necessarily get us the project, etc. Okay? By the way, that lack of internal and external networks, we'll talk about that. It's not a question of whether you like people. Do your homework, ladies. There are reasons why we hook up with the people that we hook up with. Part of it is cultural. But the other part is our sense of relief that they will accept us for who we are. And then the other part of it is we're lazy. We don't want to put in the sweat equity to have what we need. Okay. How many of you have seen this discussion about the circle of influence and circle of concern around this is Stephen Covey's work out of his 7 Habits. I put this up here because I want you to think about if we're busy worrying and thinking about all the things that are impacting us, that's our circle of concern, then we can't put a lot of things out for our circle of influence where we can have impact, And I just want you to do a little bit of thinking about which of these is your area. Are you more worried so that your circle of influence is much smaller like it is on the right? And you're busy with everything else and everybody else instead of yourself? Or is it like the left and you're spending more time with the circle of influence and your ability to be successful? I'm going to quickly go over this. A lot of you mentioned that you've done some things on emotional intelligence. This is a soft skill that the perception is, and by the way, it's learned, as well as what's already inside you. But the advantage is that men and women that understand how they behave around emotions and things like that are usually, generally, seen as more successful. Particularly when you're a lot judgmental and understand what makes other people tick and why do they get upset about things. And then when you finally explode and no one expected it, how are you going to explain that first to yourself, not to them? Okay? And then when we look at emotional intelligence, our self-awareness, which is the most important cornerstone, self-management, social awareness, and relationship building. How many of you think you're good at building relationships? Okay, so are we talking about good relationships or phony relationships? Huh? There is a difference, would you agree? Phony relationships are what? What's phony? Say it again. Superficial, what else? They're not genuine. I mean, I need you now, but I may not need you tomorrow. I may not even know your name tomorrow. Well, I heard that. I heard you say that under your breath. She said, kind of like work relationships. And that's how we think about work relationships. But I will tell you, I know, and I used to have and probably still have some phony, not really good, genuine relationships in my personal circle too. And we pass judgment on those. We do. We're not good at it. Sometimes even in our family, am I going to tolerate him calling me again? And he's a cousin or something like that. Okay? So the whole point is, where are we honest about what it looks like in terms of our own emotional intelligence? I'm going to make a little caveat here. I do expect you to do more research and reading on different topics, whether you like blogs or podcasts or anything like that, TED Talks, on all the topics that you've heard today, because shame on you if you're not moving your own needle by doing something with this information. Shame on you, even if you collect 50 business cards. Okay, so become a masterful influencer. I'm going to throw this question out. What matters most to your boss and to his or her boss? What do you know about your team? What do you know about your boss? What do you know about your boss's boss in terms of needs and values? Because once you find those out, you have an opportunity to create an influencing strategy. Is it going to take a little sweat equity? Absolutely. You want to be in the game? You give it a little sweat. Okay? So here's the 9 influencing strategies that I want to just mention. You can Google this. So you may use interpersonal awareness, and I've got definitions for these very quickly. You may use bargaining. By the way, bargaining is not negative. It's not barter. It's bargaining. You have something I want, I have something you want. We have to have the communication around how we're going to support one another in getting that, and boom, we've got success. It's an influencing style. Relationship building, I asked you about that. When I took this assessment, that's my highest one, relationship building. I care about it, and I put a lot of energy into it. And not just for my business. I put it in there because there's a lot of people I feel very comfortable and want to support. Empowerment. How do I empower others? Because that's an influencing strategy for me. Don't look at that one, coercion. Everyone understand coercion? What's it mean? No, it doesn't mean changing someone's mind. I wish it did. That'd be easy. I'm totally loving that you're not quite clear what coercion is. It's like manipulating, but what if I'm the boss and I come in and tell you, you either do it or you're out? It's a threat. By the way, there are times when coercion is an important little, nice little nasty strategy to use. And not just when you're the boss. Because sometimes it could be, okay, look, you guys, if you're my team, we either all pull together or we're all going to be out of here. Do we want that? Now the truth comes out. My back-end member of the team says yes before everyone else has even finished thinking about it. Yeah, she's not on the team anymore. We know how to get rid of you. Okay, so look at these others. What do we mean by organizational awareness? And I think you said it earlier, that it's important that you understand the culture of your organization. But what's this organizational awareness mean? What do you understand about it? Knowing who's who, and where they are, where they might have power. We talked about personal power a lot today. I had a client years ago. You're going to love this story. He had been in the Marines for 25 years. And he became my coaching client because he could not understand when he went to a company that his style as a former Marine was going to not get him places. When in those days they were called secretaries. There were 2 secretaries who did not like his style. They didn't like the way he treated the women in the organization, on and on and on. They got him fired. And he needed coaching after that to understand, how could they do that? What was it that they did that allowed them to really put him in a position where he was terminated? And it wasn't sexual harassment, don't misunderstand me. He did not understand organizational awareness and where the power was in that company, and it was not with the president. It was with those secretaries. He totally ignored it. They were buck privates as far as he was concerned, if you think about the Marines. That's where he was wrong. So your ability to understand what your organization is like, what it stands for, and by the way, whether their values match your values. Because if they don't, pray about it, work on your resume, and then make some decisions. Those are your only choices. Because you don't want to look at yourself in the mirror when you have compromised your own values to stay at an organization. Let me be clear. I don't care what they're paying you, because you still have to get up every morning and look at yourself in the mirror. Okay? Common vision. The organization stands for XYZ. You agree, you're arm in lockstep. But there might be people on your team that you need to influence to get there. Impact management. To what extent can I make presentations, myself have professional presence? How can I sway people to my size just by my stance, by the type of personality I have, by my ability to understand all of the things that are important to my organization? And then that last one, logical persuasion. Logical persuasion I love. It is not me. When I worked for Marriott and for the Federal Reserve Bank, I needed people on my team who were the logical persuasion people, because they would come to me with the numbers. Here's the reason why you can't do that, Marvell. Let me put it in lay language for you, because I didn't get it. And I was humble enough and open enough to say, oh, I'm so glad you're on my team, because you're right, I don't get it. So what do you recommend that we do? Because we have to influence a boss who also has a PhD in molecular blah blah. We need him to get it, and he can't get it from me. Everybody understand? Okay. So here's just a quick definition of each one of these 9. And I'm going to make a recommendation for you. When you get the PowerPoint, even if you don't do the assessment right away, take your best guess and gut feeling. Where do you think you are? Empowerment, making others feel valued by involving them in decision making and giving them recognition. That was probably my second one after relationship building. I loved working. I would do the work of my direct reports at least once or twice, always with a smile. But then after that, I would say, you know, it's going to be difficult for me to explain why you're still here if I'm still doing your job and my job. You got to help me. Okay? Do one or the other. Interpersonal awareness, identifying other people's concerns and positioning your ideas to match with theirs. Bargaining, gain support by negotiating a mutually satisfactory outcome, exchanging favors, things like that. That can even be with people that are above you. It doesn't have to always be in your peer group. Building relationships, taking the time to get to know others personally. Maintaining friendly communication so that others will be inclined to support your ideas. Quick story on this. In one of the circles today, we had someone say, but how do you work with someone that you absolutely hate? So I thought about that a moment, and I said, well, look at all that energy that you're expending hating that person. What's it helping you get done in terms of work? However, and the person said, well, they're in a position higher than me, and I asked the question, well, do you want that job? Well, you got to think about whether you want the job. If you do, doesn't matter if you hate them or not, you're going to get to know them, and not get to know them to kiss up so that you'll be the successor, but to get to know them to find out what are the successful orbits around him that you need to get to know. We tend to think we have to be out there by ourselves in terms of influence. We're just single in the boat with a paddle that the sharks have already started to eat, okay, and we don't know how we're going to get further. But the reality is, step back from our emotional stuff, and I'm no different than you. There have been many a time I've gone home crying and cursing to my husband, and he just looks at me. But why are you still there? And I'm thinking about the work that I do and how much I love it, blah, blah, blah. That's not enough. Okay? It's got to be okay that you quit, which I did a couple of times. I quit positions because they just weren't fulfilling the need of my happiness and euphoria anymore. Organizational awareness, common vision, impact management, logical persuasion. I'm not good at using that data and stuff. I need somebody else on my team to do that. And I'm going to give them the accolades for doing so. And where it was possible, they get the raises, they get the 5 days off, they get the parking space, they get the new car. I mean, whatever I had to offer, I did it. But coercion, using threats, reprimands, or pressure to get others to do what you want. Okay. I want you to do as an exercise, those 9 strategies. I want you to choose, you don't have to do it now, choose what 2 styles do you want to focus on in building your influence skills. 2 of those things you believe you're weak in and you may need them, so I want you to choose that opportunity and pick 2. Everybody clear? Yes? Okay, and then who can you reach out to for feedback on your style? This is huge, huge. We oftentimes don't want to get feedback because we think we're going to get the same old every time, particularly if we're Black and Latina. They're going to tell us, well, you know your style, well, you know this, well, you know that. Well, come on now. To a certain extent, they're right because you don't work in a vacuum. And you need to work in that area. Doesn't mean you kiss ass. It doesn't mean you, oh, all right, you're going to be like everyone else. That isn't what it means. But it does mean being sensitive to how you temper what you show up as. And taking feedback, honestly, even if you don't like the feedback, get recommendations on what you could do to enhance what you bring to the table. You cannot go home angry every day that they don't appreciate you have 5 master's degrees and 16 other certifications that still have not moved your professional needle from assistant manager to assistant manager. Everybody with me? Okay? You don't get to go home and cry about that because you haven't done anything about it. And then lastly, how can you enhance your impact within your current team or department? You need to ask yourself more questions. If there's some project that somebody doesn't want to do, you don't get to fold your arms and say, well, I'm not doing it. They just assume I'm going to do it. Why aren't you going to do it? What if it means exposure? One of the things I recommended today in the mentoring circles was people talk about, well, nobody gives me an opportunity, and I never get to do this, and I never get to do that. Well, what are you asking for? Creatively, what are you saying to people? If you don't like your voice when you are out there and you're worried someone else is going to think that you're weak and don't have any skills, then go to Toastmasters and use Toastmasters to build your confidence around public speaking. And I will guarantee you, they will help you with hecklers. You will turn out to love hecklers. Okay? But the flip side of that is, to what extent do you show up creating opportunities for yourself? The example I gave was, let's say in your organization you have volunteer things that happen all year, like United Way. Do some of your companies do United Way? I used to coach some of my clients at the Federal Reserve Bank who complained about that. I said, volunteer for the United Way campaign. Get on the committee, and then as you're looking down the list of things that need to be done, your hand goes up first. Oh, I'm happy to lead the trying to get our donations on the 5th floor. I'll do that. Because then every meeting, you get to report out about what you've done so far. You get to hear yourself speak, which builds confidence. Everybody with me? That's only one example, but you cannot complain if you're not doing anything to move the needle for your own influence. And it's not just, well, I have 15 degrees. I know more than you do. What that says to me is, actually, you don't know more because you don't know how to show up in an area where people will begin to look at you as an opportunity for a value add. You just want to demonstrate you've got all the degrees when that cannot be your only area of claim to fame. And the only reason I can talk to you like this, I've only been around a day or two longer than most of you. Only a day or two. Just a day or two. And as a result, having this Women of Color conference, I'm so excited because Cindy has done this and it's been successful with Breaking Glass. But when me and a few colleagues started Women of Color Action Network back in 2000, by the way, the Catalyst organization out of New York did a phenomenal study on women of color in corporate America in 1999. Google it. And you're going to say, holy moly, we're dealing with the same things now that we were then. Okay? But that was our impetus to get it started, because oftentimes women of color didn't have anyone to talk to. We were islands. It just didn't support us. But that created the opportunity for us to think about how we support one another. Motivation and engagement really quickly. Achievement, responsibility, recognition, mindfulness, and opportunities for growth and advancement. Think about these as all positives that I want you to consider. If these things are all in my network and in myself, then I'm going to be okay, even when I make that decision to leave this job because I want to move to another city, sight unseen, and do something else. Everybody with me? This is the positive piece that you want to build, because that's going to keep you engaged. Here's my other. I love this little quote. Chin up, princess, or the crown slips. Chin up. Thank you, ladies. Woo!